So it looks like, well, today is not April 30, tomorrow is April 30. Miracles still happen, but it looks like the roads may not be ready as at April 30 as the minister had mentioned before. But I guess, as I said, we'll wait for the ministry, the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing, to come up with some explanation as to why that may not be. Another delay, which has been confirmed by the federal government through a communication from the Office of the President, is that the census has been deferred. You know, yesterday we were having this conversation concerning the census, and one of the questions we were asking the gentleman that came was, look, is there any sign or hint that there was going to be some delay? Well, he said, well, it's not his place to say. But anyway, long and short, a number of things have been done, and that is the reality that we find ourselves in now. The census has been postponed because the President has approved the postponement of the 2023 population and housing census, earlier scheduled for 3rd to 7th May 2023, to a date to be determined by the incoming administration. Now, one of the good points to make is that the process, as far as I'm concerned, the process has started. Why do I say so? Because the President noted in that communication put out that the enumeration area demarcation of the country, conduct of the first and second pre-tests, the recruitment and training of ad hoc workers, procurement of personal digital assistants, PDAs, and ICT infrastructure have all been procured and done and gotten ready for the process. The question is, what is the reason for the delay? I guess we'll wait for government and the other authorities from the NPC and a number of others to come out and tell us exactly what is happening. Now, it is also natural for us to mention the fact that, well, it seems like it's a day of delays. I'm sorry. The Sudan, Nigerians being evacuated from Sudan, how far so far? It's a natural question for anyone to ask. It is a natural question for anyone to ask, and with the kind of information that we've received from Nigerians in transit who were only able to raise a voice one way or the other as to their plight, it definitely is something concerning and something that we should that should give us a reason to ask questions after questions. We had that conversation again yesterday, and we have assurances that a whole load of Nigerians are at the Sudanese border into Egypt now. Just some paperwork, administrative functions, and then they can cross and find their way home through the aircrafts already procured, donated, as one can say, by a private airline, Air Peace. It is also fair to mention that some organizations, civil society organizations, are asking other Nigerians who have private jets to donate for this purpose. It is a fair one. No one is under compulsion to do that, but there are so many issues to raise about the Nigerians in Sudan, so many issues to raise. And I believe that some of those issues will be raised this morning when we have that conversation with our guests, because it is natural, it is okay for people to be asking, what is happening with your neighbors? How is it going to affect you? Those things are important so that you are better prepared, and if there is anything you can do to intervene so that the unrest in that other country doesn't come to you, I think it's only fair and sensible to do that. But we'll get into all of that when we get into the program. But for now, let me run through some of the ideas on the table this morning. On our menu this morning, we have agenda for coming government that's concerning ease of doing business. It is interesting to note that quite a number of Nigerians are in business. More than almost 40 million micro, small, and medium enterprises that are registered with government. There are several others that may not be, so you could actually have a lot more than that are MSMEs. How well are they doing? We'll find out in the course of the program. The second item on our menu this morning is still on the crisis in Sudan. I mean, that's it right there. And it is not to overflog the issue, but Can we prevent the spate of building collapses? We'll examine that as well when we get into the program. On our lifestyle segment this morning, we'll be talking about 21st century parenting. It is becoming more and more dire than so many Nigerians, including parents, are aware of. You'll hear some very shocking things this morning and what we can do to prevent it getting worse. And our artist of the week is human being. Let's just leave it at that. So please grab your cup of cocoa and cocoa, or whichever one takes your fancy, and let's get into it right after now.
We must stand for Nigeria. I believe Nigeria. Wishing on a star to take me where you are. Wishing on a dream, no matter how far it seems. Everywhere I go to see the love and flow, in unity to stand forth from south up to the north. Only when there's love can there be no cause to fight. Only when we fear God can everything be alright. One nation, great people, green, white, green. You're my brother, take my hand. One nation, great people, and everything will be alright. Stand for the truth, without the problem, down from the roots. Pick up yourself now, pick up on the youth. Anybody causing problem now, make them kaput. Stand together now, people no fighting. One love is what we are preaching. Let's upgrade our understanding and stop this nonsense, political doubting. That's potential, demand capacity, let's walk the walk, let's show the world. Say our head, yeah. Let's stand up for something, fight for the right thing, for whatever, moving for the future. Cause I believe in this entity called Nigeria. I believe. Peace and unity. One Nigeria. One nation.
Making Nigeria great is the agenda every Nigerian must have, whichever area or position you find yourself. And that's why our first conversation this morning is around ease of doing business, by way of setting an agenda, so to speak, for the incoming administration. Nigeria is home to more than 39.6 million micro, small, and medium enterprises. These are the figures that government can point to. How about those others that may not be registered right now? You most certainly agree that there will be so many like that. So these comprises 96.7% of all businesses in Nigeria. Some 67% of these businesses are youth-owned. Yep. In 2022, MSMEs contribute more than 45% of the country's gross domestic product, GDP, with 96.9% of these businesses in the micro cadre. They account for nearly 90% of the jobs made available nationwide. And that information, of course, you will get from the PEBEC office, which is headed by the Special Advisor to the President on Ease of Doing Business, Dr. Jumoke Oduwole. So let's have a conversation around this morning, because the government is making some claims and Nasima is asking questions around those ones. Olubunmi Osuntui joins us this morning, Secretary General, International Chamber of Commerce in Nigeria, as well as George Atomi, who is Principal Managing Partner, George Atomi and Partners. He's also Director and Chairman on a variety of boards, including the Daily Times of Nigeria, EKDC, NBA, and the Nigeria Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Let me begin with you, madam, as they say, ladies first. Where really would you position Nigeria in terms of the ease of doing business? We know that those efforts were being made in the World Bank Global Ranking before, which over time has been suspended. But Nigeria seems to have sustained that ease of doing business platform or parameter, which has occasioned states being lined up in terms of awards for being the state with the best doing business parameters and all of that. But where will you place Nigeria in terms of ease of doing business? Particularly, which of the indicators would you say we're doing well? Which ones do you think we need to improve on?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. And I want to appreciate this opportunity to share my thoughts on this. I would want to say that, yes, indeed, in terms of policy developments, we are doing very well. It's one thing to develop policies. It's another thing to ensure that those policies are complementary and they are advancing the economy as a whole. You will agree with me with your introductory statement in the course of the program today. There have been a lot of challenges on the part of MSMEs, SMEs, and government actually needs to put actions to the policies that have been made to make life easy for the small and medium enterprises. Otherwise, we'll just be churning out a lot of policies and we won't have any specific thing to show for it. I will wish personally that the administration, whether incoming or outgoing, will do the needful to alleviate the pains being experienced by a number of these small and medium enterprises. I mean, let's just take the traffic. It's horrendous. It has dovetailed to every part of Lagos. You can imagine if, as an SME, you have a delivery, you're going for a wedding, and you are held up. You can't start having the party on the road. Neither can you deliver expected. These are infrastructure lapses in the environment. It's not really encouraging the SMEs and MSMEs. Just to cite an example.
Indicators, madam. But let me ask Mr. Itomi. She talked about policies. I'm pretty sure that you are aware many people complain about the fact that we have amazing policies, but we are challenged in the area of implementation. And it's not the president, not the vice president, not the minister, not the people in the offices at the federal or state levels that will get the jobs done. It is the civil servants who are like the foot soldiers. How significant do you see that in the scheme of things?
Good morning, Ayo, and I always enjoy the work that you do. I'm glad this conversation is taking place. It's an agenda-setting conversation for the new administration. You are absolutely correct. We're not short on policies. We're not even short on the laws. It's the implementation. Incidentally, the PEBEC has done quite a lot of work in ensuring that the legal and regulatory framework exists to promote the ease of doing business. And today, the MDAs, under some of the new regulations, the onus is on them to ensure that when an application is made for anything, that it is treated within a defined period. And if it is not treated within that defined period, it is then assumed that the registration or whatever has been applied for is deemed to have been registered. The onus is now being shifted to them. So what MSMEs and all others seeking to do business should do is to make sure they get good legal advice when it comes to all these regulatory issues. The law now exists, and you must take full advantage of that law. So gone are those days when you do simple things like pass resolutions to increase your shares or get members onto your board, and you go to the CAC and you're just jerked around for weeks. Just simple registration. You are the one taking the business risk. But the guy who wants to make money simply because the law has positioned him to make money just bluffs you. Those days are gone. So hopefully, to translate to reality, MSMEs must be familiar with these new laws and regulations and ensure that they make optimal use of them. And let's, on the subject of legal and regulatory environment, we're talking at both inviting investments from abroad and from within. Any economy, the fulcrum on any economy is law and order. Law and order deals with issues to do with the rule of law, sanctity of contracts, enforcement of rights. So issues to do with even getting adjudication when you have a dispute. Today, look at what's going on with our court system. The court system is clogged up. Civil cases are a distant consideration now for priority. Political cases take priority, criminal cases, then a distant third will be civil cases. So you can just have simple, straightforward disputes, and you are on the queue for God knows how long. This is no way to encourage anyone who wants to do business, because the legal and regulatory regime should exist to engender people who are taking risks to take those risks and be certain that upon the happening of certain events, this is the result. That is the way anybody plans. If you don't do that, it will increase the cost of doing business. And when you talk about the cost of doing business, many people find it difficult to relate how the bottlenecks we create in this legal and regulatory environment affect the cost of doing business. We're complaining about airfares being very high in Nigeria. Partially, it is because the Nigerian environment is perceived internationally to be high risk. You can't get your forex out. You can't you can't even get insurance in some cases for the risk that you want to cover. And the way many businesses cover it is to jack up prices. So it is the helpless citizen who pays for it. The flights out of Nigeria, go and look at the cost. You pay twice what you would do averagely anywhere else. What people don't understand, it is because of the perception that doing business is so difficult in this environment.
But Mr. Eto, my apologies for butting in. This is not new in the practical sense of it. It would seem like these things have been happening over time. Would you place this at the behest of federal agencies, especially in terms of the regulatory authorities now, or state agencies? I know you're aware, for instance, that on the average we have something in the region of 30 or more taxes, federal, state, local government and all. So if the business environment is as caustic as you say it is, as high risk as you say it is, are we unaware of this fact? Is it something that's catching us unawares? Where are these bottlenecks that we can't just take out of the way?
First of all, straightforward, both the federal and the state governments are guilty here. And what has simply happened is that the state governments have taken a cue from the federal government. You know, when you impose taxes, levies, whatever, they should be imposed only when you have created an environment for the business you seek to tax is making profit. But in Nigeria, it is often almost punitive. Look at land. You want to acquire land. The only reason government is involved in land transaction is because the Land Use Act says government, you must go to government. Otherwise, it's a deal between two parties. But the guy who now sits to register the land, to give you leases, to do that. Now gives you a string of payments you make ahead of the business you want to do. There's no businessman who comes up with that kind of a bill that will not pass it ultimately to the customer. So land in Nigeria is virtually dead capital, whereas everywhere else, land works for you. Many people get land, CFOs take you, God knows, 2 years, 3 years for you to get it. No bank is going to lend against that. And even when they finally lend against that, and they want to realize that security, is another bottleneck. So it's both on the state and the federal government. You talked about taxes. I think we've all lost count of what you have to pay for taxes. Some is even some crude form. They just mount roadblocks and just simply extort money out of you. It's the facade itself is very disheartening. You are traveling from one state to another, and suddenly they put nails on the road. If you don't pay them, you don't go through. This is internal business. Movements, ask any haulage guy in the haulage business, moving goods from one state to another state. The several checkpoints that you get, there must be a conscious effort to clear all those things. What about the customs regime? I mean, customs regime, let the business thrive. But don't ask somebody who is bringing in agricultural equipment, industrial equipment, to pay you huge taxes before they even start the business. They should pay zero taxes and then just find some other way to tax their profits. The businesses must work because, like you correctly said in your statistics, the MSMEs altogether probably account for over 70% of the employments that are going on, not even government. But government cannot just sit there as a tax collector or as a gatekeeper, and you are just sort of fleecing everybody. This today is the perception. So talking about agenda setting, it is important that that perception is taken away. I am glad that at the subnational levels, there are now indices by which you judge a performance by states. And we see that some states are doing a lot to attract investments to their territory. That should continue to be encouraged. But the overall optics as of today is not good, and we need to do something about it.
Let me switch to you, Madam. I know you may want to add a word or two to what you have heard Mr. Itomi said, but what I would like you to speak to after that is, again, back to the indicators. 2 of the 6 indicators, according to PEBEC, infrastructure and a secure and stable environment, account for the biggest pain that micro, small, and medium enterprises go through, their biggest pain points, at a combined 41.1% of MSME dissatisfaction. You already mentioned infrastructure the other time, the roads being just one of several such. How do you think we can begin to reverse this trend?
I think the major suggestion I would give, I'll put on the front burner for us to discuss this morning, is the need for us to work in partnership. When I'm talking about us, I'm talking about private sector and government. It's very important to be able to work collaboratively. I actually feel that when we do this, like it's been done in other developed countries, you'll be able to sit at the round table and be able to agree on the modalities to advance the economy of our great nation. This nation has potential is not in doubt. We have great potentials, but I see that we work at cross purposes. All the taxes you are talking about, the issue of the customs, the issue in the banking industry, talk of any sector of the economy. There's a whole lot of overlapping of functions, and it shouldn't be. And for every institution of government, they already have targets. And proudly, they come to tell you that they have even exceeded their target for the year. I mean, the issue of advancing the economy is not only in meeting targets and advancing it and just amassing wealth for government. What have they done with this wealth? What have they done? What are the specific things that have been done in the economy to advance the ordinary person? What has been done to create jobs? Those who are creating the jobs, they are making life very turbulent for them. It is very, 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 it is very limiting, to say the least. It is very important for me. I would say that the first thing I'm going to put on the table is to see the private sector, whether the private sector is in the chambers or they are through the employer organization or they are through whatever group of people. It is very important to sit together and address some cogent issues that will help us to advance. And talking about the exchange rate and the cost of doing business, the need for government to address that is very, very evident. I mean, if you are exchanging a foreign exchange, if you are going into a business that involves international transaction and you will need to use foreign exchange, you can imagine how much you are going to exchange the amount of money, and how do you pass that even to the customers that you have. It could be very limiting and make things very difficult. It is very, very important to do something very urgently about the exchange rate that we have, apart from the infrastructure that I did mention before. Wastages in government is another area. Government needs, I mean, yes, we are paying taxes. People are paying taxes. But the taxes that they are being paid, what are we using them for? We are using them to nurture a few people that you can number them, and then they use it to live a larger than life at the expense of the ordinary Nigerians. I think this is the time for the incoming government to look into all of these excesses so that we can truly commit to the present and the future of Nigerians. We talk about foreign relationship. I mean, how can we have our people in Sudan and then they are sleeping in open air, life is miserable, and they are calling for help? And then I know that they are making effort, but they must advance this effort. Everybody must advance this effort. And the effort should not be limited only to government. Like you rightly said, those who have private jet, whoever is able to provide any support or to make life easy, we should continue to do that. And then one other thing I want to say is that we don't need to be reactive. It's important to be proactive. We know that the issues, right from the time that the issues are coming up in Sudan, it is very important for those in the authorities to have made necessary arrangements. It is not when they start sleeping on the road or when their life is exposed unnecessarily that we are taking the concerted effort that we need to take. I know that the country is doing so many things at the same time at this point in time, but the life of these ordinary people is very critical, and we must come to their aid.
Well, Mr. Itomi mentioned the regulatory environment the other time, and I'd like you to speak to that as well, madam. He specifically mentioned that, look, if a micro, small, and medium enterprise practitioner or owner is having some regulatory challenges, that the laws are different now, and we should test the laws by engaging the services of a legal practitioner and, fight whatever the cause may be with these regulatory agencies. Well, it sounds like a good idea on the one hand, but how easily, madam, do you think that would be embraced by a micro, small, and medium enterprise owner who is already having difficulty doing business, but now is being frustrated by a regulatory agency and is now being advised to pursue a legal cause to redress whatever the challenge is? What's your take on that?
Yes, my take is that going the legal way does not necessarily bring about frustration. In fact, presently, there are a lot of disputes that have been resolved through mediation. You know, we have different alternative dispute resolution processes, and the judiciary is bringing that even to to everybody that needs to settle one dispute or the other. You have the arbitration, you have the mediation, you have, you have others who can give you expert opinions. You have different opportunities. I want to commend the Lagos State government because I know that they have gone far. Even the chambers are also deploying this means of settling the disputes in their various jurisdictions, so that the increase in the dispute and the filings that we have can be reduced considerably. That being said, I also would want to advocate that other organizations, the business membership organization, can speak on behalf of their members, and they can provide, a department where people can go at little or no fee to lay their issues before this group of people who would then take up the case on their behalf, and we have a lot of those being settled, especially things to do with land matters, civil matters, and so on and so forth. That has helped considerably, but we need to increase the tempo. Yes. For issues that are very, very critical, it's also very important to go to the necessary avenues for settling the dispute, especially if you have specified the process of settling dispute in any contract you are having with any business partner. And that I would advocate. It is important for SMEs. If you are going to go into any business, you must read through the lines. If you don't read through the lines, you go and sign anything, you can expose your business to a lot of risk. You can expose your business to demurrage if you are not careful, especially in taking loans. If you want to take loans, it is important. It is cheaper for you to allow your lawyers to look through the papers before you sign than trying to find a way to settle the dispute thereafter. So, like they say generally, there are some people you cannot run away from. You can't run away from your doctor. You can't run away from your lawyers. They are very essential to your life. Thank you.
Well, that's very, very interesting when you put it that way. But, when we consider that information put out by the PEBEC office that 96.9% of the MSMEs in Nigeria are in the micro cadre, affordability of legal services would be something. But, that also raises another question which I'd like to take to Mr. Etomi. The latest report from the PEBEC office says that Gombe is at the top position of the states with the ease of doing business in Nigeria. Jigawa is second and Sokoto comes third. Ironic, wouldn't you say? But a breakdown of the report by geographical zones shows that the northwest of Nigeria is the most friendly regional business environment in Nigeria, with an average ease of doing business satisfaction score of 6.36, followed by the northeast, the southeast, the southwest, the north central, and the south-south in that order. You talked about integration. Well, Madam spoke about, was it you that spoke about partnerships the other time? And it raises that question. Do you see a need for states to collaborate efforts in order to make states themselves, the states and the regions, more business friendly? Because leaving everything to the federal government alone, I'm not sure it's the where we want to go. Businesses are conducted in the states. What do you think?
You're absolutely correct. Just before I address the specific question, I just wanted to build on the point made by Madam, and that is to the effect that there is one of the greatest achievements of PEBEC was seen to the passing of the Business Facilitations Act of 2022. All businesses should be familiar with that act. That is the act that has introduced the various provisions to make it easy for businesses to thrive. It's new. People should get familiar with it. It's so important. Now, to the specific issue of states and collaborations, you are spot on. We don't live in silos. What really made all of us lazy in this country was the advent of the oil business. Well before oil, the states were not just collaborating, they were competing in healthy fashion. I grew up in Nigeria when it was just 3 regions, then it became 4 regions. And the regions looked at their comparative advantages and worked on them. So in the then Eastern region, where a lot of palm produce was their mainstay, they were ahead of the game. In the then Northern region, we had most other agricultural products, groundnuts, sorghum, all those things. In the West was cocoa. There was no mention about oil. And they not only traded among themselves, they actually traded across borders internationally. So we need to reinvent that. What just happened with the advent of oil, and of course with the foray of the military into politics, which then centralized everything we did, was that all revenues accruing to the federal government from these commanding heights of the economy were then centralized, and then states were made to go and get share as they continue to do till today. That is just no model. A model that emphasizes sharing as opposed to productivity is doomed at some point to collapse. And really, we're at that juncture. To be candid, agenda setting for this regime, they're going to take very many difficult decisions. As we know, the removal of subsidy for petroleum, for power, and for all other things that have been done is right at the top of the agenda. Those are difficult decisions, but to do them, you must then create alternatives that will initially alleviate the hardship it will bring on the populace, and then you then build on it. So where am I going with this? Let's start with the very familiar topic, power and all that. Power holds the key to the diversification of this economy. So no matter what is going on, we must consolidate on the modest gains of the privatization, and then begin thereafter to take advantage of new legal regime that allows states to fully participate. And talking about collaboration among states, even though today the law says each state can now regulate the industry from generation to distribution, you don't have to do it if you're not ready. You can collaborate with other states that are ready. We just need that. So if you have a power source, a gas, for example, holds the key to provision of power to the thermal plants, which today provide over 80% of our electricity. If those states that are abutting gas belts can work with those who are far away from the gas belts and find some ways of seeing how they can get access to that raw material so that they too can fire up. Those who are doing solar should do so.
Okay, but just a quick one, Mr. Etomi. My sincere apologies, because we're wrapping up now. But, you know, the issue you just raised now, raises this question. There is no sector that is on its own or by itself. You mentioned the power sector, for instance. We have the Ministry of Power, but so do we have the Ministry of Science and Technology and the rest of them. They have relationships, things that they can do together. The same thing with the Ministry of Works and Housing. They have collaborative relationships, for instance, with the Ministry of Transport, and on and on and on like that. All of these issues, or whatever it is that the country needs, there have to be collaboration at various levels. So we are not, as you mentioned the other time, paying so many taxes from different ministries, departments, and agencies, rather than just, maybe just centralizing everything so we don't have to do these things in silo. And the president has often, including in security, spoken about the need for collaboration of these ministries, departments, and agencies. From what you know, what are the bottlenecks to achieving this, and how do we deal with it? How should the incoming administration deal with this working in silos, where one ministry talks something and the other one, speaks a different language on the same issue?
I'm a student of history. If you go back to where we got this proliferation of MDAs in Nigeria, it was, I think, towards the Babangida regime, where the presidency created almost parallel agencies to what ministries were doing. And you know how bad habits just quickly gain currency, and before you know it, That's what everybody does. So you go to the ministry, get responsible for something, it's being overseen, or there's a parallel in the presidency. And we've just continued in that regime, and we've created a behemoth in the civil service that's actually creating more problems. It's hydra-headed, and it's creating a lot of problems. Let's go back to the Oronsai report, which has now come up and has recommended that these things be pruned down. Let us start from there. Let's clear the cobwebs.
Okay.
Prune it down. There are so many things. IT, you mentioned. IT has made life so easy for many people. You don't really need to be physically in Abuja now to register a company. So let's work on the IT. Incidentally, that's the space of the young people today. Many of us are doing banking transactions from home.
Yeah, I think, my apologies, Mr. Eto, because indeed we are wrapping up. I think you even nailed it when you talked about the Oronsai report. It's been famous for many years now. God knows when it will be resurrected. Madam, your last words on this as well, and perhaps to speak to what micro, small, and medium enterprise owners should prioritize as their own agenda for the incoming administration.
I would suggest that anyone that is going into business should have their ears, eyes, everyone open and active. They say there's no ignorance in law. If you default, and you can be penalized. So for me, I would suggest that everyone that is going to business, no matter how lucrative that you think the business is, it's very important to open your eyes and your ears, know the regulations that is guiding your business. You cannot just enter into a business. I don't know how to take this, pay this, I don't know this one, I don't know that. It's very important to also ensure that you don't build your business on debt.
Wow.
If you build your business on debt, that business is likely to collapse, especially if you go through this channel of taking free money from the banking industry. Banking industry is trying, they are supporting, but they have to pay the bills and they have to charge their interest rate. So you must look at it before you venture into business and base it on debt, because all the while you just be paying a huge sums of interest rate, and you don't even know when you are signing in. Sometimes you don't even sign anything. Sometimes you just say you can just take 1 million. 1 million to start a business, and then you are paying, the payback is almost like half a million, and they will help you to spread it for years, and you won't even know. You just notice that you are just paying interest, and you are paying interest.
It's interesting, madam. My apologies. It's interesting that, I mean, the angle you're looking at talking about this issue is letting the owners of the businesses prioritize their own responsibilities. That's actually quite courageous, because many would say everything should be government, but at least now we know that the individuals themselves have a responsibility in all this. We have to thank you both.
I have just one little point.
Okay, 30 seconds, please. Yeah.
Quickly.
Yeah.
Cost of running or governance. If we're going to make huge sacrifices, when we take off subsidies and all those, the government must give us something back. They must cut business, the cost of doing business.
Okay.
Don't fly first class, don't do all those things, no jeeps, none of those things. We've got to be very practical. There's a problem, we need to deal with it.
Thank you so much, Mr. George Atomi, Principal Managing Partner, George Atomi and Partners, Director and Chairman on a variety of boards, including the Daily Times of Nigeria, EKDC, NBA, and Nigeria Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, as well as Ms. Olubunmi Osuntoi, who is Secretary General, International Chamber of Commerce in Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of our conversation this morning.
Thank you.
When we return from this break, we're expecting our children, students of Nigeria in Sudan, back home. More on that and a number of other issues around it when we return from this break. Please stay with us.
Where's Gloria?
Excuse me, ma'am.
Hello? Where Glow now?
I dare here.
Glow, don't go village. Tell all our customer.
Everybody pay attention. See, now Glow berekete 10x. Now they dash me 10 times the credits when I load. Or even summer me double data join.
Yeah. Wait, so with 1.5 when they give all of us, so you then enjoy up to 15,000 naira credit and data.
And I say I never finish you. See, when I say we enjoy, if you join Glow berekete 10x, when I go get 1,000 naira welcome credit. You just carry your phone, dial *777#. Finish.
We love you, don't. Oh, now see there here. Hello, please, I'm looking for Glow. Please, save now Glow be they fine. Now Glow be they go. Okay, so
enjoy 10 times the value of your recharge on Glow Berekete 10X. You also get 1,000 naira for calls and data and double data bonus on your subscription.
Wherever you go, Teramashe. Whatever you do, Teramashe. Your time done they gone. Your beats done they done. You think say God in order for your side, and you want to find another way to prosper. You think say God in order just get your time. I beauty well, ileri tolu shey.
Come on,
Thank you so much for staying with us. Well, see, as of this morning, the first batch of 1,600 Nigerians evacuated from Sudan are to arrive. They were supposed to arrive yesterday, but they have not arrived, as at this morning. Now, media reports says that there are thousands of people at the borders, and as such, there will be delays in getting Nigerians into Egypt. It is also believed that Egypt wants the students profiled before coming in. In another development, NIDCOM, that's the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, in a statement signed by Gabriel Odu, said more than 7,000 people, including Nigerians fleeing Sudan, have been denied access to Egypt since their arrival late Thursday evening. So many issues to raise on this matter with our guests. Ladi Thompson is a security analyst. He joins us virtually, along with Bayo Oluwake, who is Consulting Research Fellow, African Resource Development Center. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Let me begin with you, Pastor Thompson. Well, you've been talking about this Hydra-headed security challenges for decades, and we're here now. Can we slow this trend or stop it? My own challenge, a single challenge that I raised when we talked about this last week was that there's only one country between Nigeria and Sudan. Any other country, any other route will be much longer. How significant is that in the scheme of things for you?
Well, let me quickly say to you that we think there's a country between Nigeria and Sudan. Thank you very much, Ayo. But if you look at the developments of what's going on in the sub-region and what has been going on with this Hydra that we've been talking about, the Hydra of terror, there really and truly is no border between Nigeria and Sudan. Now, let me quickly tell you something that we need to take note of and why Nigerians need to learn quickly from what is happening in the Sudan. Don't forget that in 1958, when we were talking about independence, the regional government of northern Nigeria knew that the judicial system and the legal systems that they had in the northern region would never, there was no way southern Nigeria would have formed a nation with them. So a panel of eminent jurists was formed in 1958. And I want to tell you that the Chief Justice of Sudan, Said Mohammed Abu Radat, was one of the person who chaired that. There was Muhammad Sharif, I think, from who was the chairman of the Pakistan Law Commission, the famous Professor J.N.D. Anderson of the College of African and Oriental Studies, University of London, Shetima Kashim, the Waziri of Borno, Peter Chimu, and Madam Musa. I can tell you that the Chief Al-Qadi of Bida, they were the ones who came up with the Penal Code and the Code of Criminal Procedure that Nigeria is using today, that was brought to the center when we agreed to start a nation together. So I'm not sure that Nigeria really understands that what we've seen play out in Sudan is playing out in Nigeria right now. And we need to learn lessons quickly.
But Mr. Thompson, just quickly before I bring in Mr. Luwaki on this matter, there are those who would say, look, Nigeria, we have Nigerians who have gone to help other countries with their own stuff as well. We've heard of Nigerians heading, of course, all over, even in the West, we have Nigerians recruited into executive offices, employed by the citizens there into executive offices. We have Nigerians who have been asked to come and help with certain judicial offices in many other parts of the world, and so on and so forth. So how is that significant to what we're talking about here this morning?
Look, the truth is this. Until you look at the history of Sudan, you won't understand the conflict that is going on there right now. And what you're going to find out is that the deterministic chaos that Sudan was engineered to be is the same deterministic chaos that Nigeria too was engineered to be. Let me take it from recent. Look, all the dynamics we have, the divide and rule, along the lines of religion, tribe, you name it, everything is present in Sudan. When it was a Mahdi state under Muhammad Ahmad in 1881, don't forget that the British colonized it around the 1890s, and they only gave up independence around 1956. Now, the history of Sudan since then has been plagued with wars, predictable. Southern Sudan was Christian. Northern Sudan was Muslim. Don't forget the Darfur, the atrocities and all that. Now, let us come to the fact that the man who used to be called the president, Omar al-Bashir of Sudan, the former soldier, military again, as usual, the same trend, the same patterns. When he was ousted by the people who are fighting now, he was one who appointed al-Bashir. It was al-Bashir who appointed whatever his name is, al-Burhan, and appointed Hamdan Dagalo. In fact, he brought in Dagalo as vice president, and don't forget that Dagalo, what we are calling the RSF, this is the rapid, whatever they are calling, is actually the Janjaweed. These are militants who are trained to destroy.
Okay.
Now, when the Southern Sudan finally got its independence and was able to move away, and President Omar appointed this present president of Sudan, 2 months after, he staged a coup. And when he staged the coup, the man who was supposed to counterbalance him was supposed to be this Dagalo. So Dagalo betrayed him. And what has happened right now is that things got to a head because immediately they first overthrew the government, they put into place something called a Transitional Sovereignty Council in 2019,
my
which
apologies,
allowed America to deal with them.
Yeah, it's interesting the trajectory this is going, literally opening the should I call it the can of worms that many people need to understand what the issues are. But let me quickly bring in Mr. Luwake as well, so at least he can have a first say in all of these. Well, Mr. Luwake, from your experience, I mean, history tells us that this conflict, as we know it today, predates even Nigeria's independence, as Pastor Thompson has also mentioned. Many people may not really understand. They mostly were talking about this crisis from the perspective of Nigerians trapped in Sudan at the moment. Is there more to it? Are there more implications or complications that we're not aware of? I ask this because officials of the Nigerian government have said over and over again that they did not know this was going to happen, that it kind of caught everybody unawares.
Well, thank you for having me. In another life, although I'm speaking in my personal capacity on this program, but in another life, I had the privilege of serving in Sudan. I lived in Sudan twice and walked across the whole country. But like I said, I'm speaking in my personal capacity on this program. First of all, I think if we conclude that we never expected what is happening in Sudan to happen, I think that will not be that statement should be taken with a pinch of salt, and I say that with all sense of responsibility. When Field Marshal Omar al-Bashir was removed by revolution by ordinary Sudanese, what you had, the military had no choice than to do what they did. The revolution had already went across Sudan, united all the people of Sudan against the regime of President Omar al-Bashir. And there were so many scenarios at that time. I'm talking of 2018. It peaked in 2019. So many scenarios by various organizations, the United Nations, and everybody who was working in Sudan. And those scenarios were predicated on the fact that Sudan had so many militia. You have, if you look at the formal institutions, you have the Sudanese Armed Forces, you have the Sudanese Police, you have the Central Reserve Police Force, you have the militia of the National Congress Party, which ran the country. That was President Bashir's party. You have the Popular Defense Forces, the PDF, and then you have the various groups that had been, for some reasons, gone to war against the state. In Darfur, you had the Justice and Equality Movement, and then you have the Sudan Liberation Movement, Al-Wahid, and then in South Kordofan and in Blue Nile, you have the Sudan Liberation Movement, the military wings of the Sudan Liberation Movements in both South Kordofan and the Blue Nile State. So Sudan already had so many formal military institutions, militia groups, and non-state actors that were engaged in one form of activity, either fighting against the state or defending the state. So anyone who was tracking the developments in the Sudan from 2018 would have been able to predict that something was going to give. Now, when you had the alliance between General Al-Burhan and Hameti, General Dagalo, there was a sigh of relief, okay, that this doomsday scenario with all of these groups, well-armed, well-resourced, and by the way, you also have the National Intelligence and Security Service, which is the Nigerian equivalent, the DSS of Nigeria. But they also had troops, okay? And actually, on January 14, 2020, the NISS was in a firefight against the Sudanese armed forces, and Khartoum was shut down. because the NISS was disbanded, but was not disarmed, and some disagreement led to that. So I'm giving you this background to understand that it may not be entirely right for anyone to say that they never saw this coming. I think the rapprochement between General Bonhan and General Dagalo only simply postponed it, you know, for everyone to say, wow, it looks like we are lucky. This doomsday scenario will not happen. Because clearly the two foremost forces on the ground, of course, were the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces. So this could have been predicted. That's all I'm trying to say. But pardon me for giving you that very long...
Well, no, even that is quite salient in the conversation, Mr. Lowaki. But the concern that Nigerians have, for which reason, part of which reason I asked Pastor Thompson that question, is the Nigerians almost caught in the crossfire. On the one hand, we're hearing that there are 7,000 Nigerians who are rushing to come home now. Some of them, as we also said in the intro, are being denied access into Egypt. On the other hand, was that information put out by the chairman of NIDCOM that there are something in the region of 5 million Nigerians. Well, I was wide-eyed when I heard that in the first place. So exactly what do you, I mean, since you've lived in Nigeria, what are the challenges that people need to understand? Since you lived in Sudan, beg your pardon, what are the challenges that you think people needed to have been aware of since, as you say, this was going to happen?
Well, first of all, I think maybe what the chairperson, and she's done a remarkable job, by the way, of the NIDCOM was probably alluding to, is the fact that we have what you call Sudanese of Nigerian descent. There are about 7 million.
Slow down, Mr. Oluwake, slow down. My apologies.
Yeah.
Please explain what that means. Sudanese of Nigerian descent.
Yes, you know, in days gone by, we had Nigerians who went for holy pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia by foot. Usually, a lot of them would go to Sudan, walk for some time in the Sudan, and cross the Red Sea to perform pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia, and then they will come back again to Sudan to prepare to return to Nigeria. But it was often said that the Sudanese would encourage them to remain. You know, this was the story. Yeah. But in any case, over time, you had this group of Sudanese who trace their origins to Nigeria and who occupy significant positions in the military, in the civil service, in the police. A significant number of them hail from the state of Darfur. So there are those who even predict that about 1/4 of the Sudanese population today are actually Sudanese of Nigerian descent. So that could be this is roughly the origin of this Sudanese, and they proudly identify themselves, by the way, as Sudanese of Nigerian descent.
Okay, but how about the other number, the 7,000 that are trying to come, back? Why are we having those challenges?
I have a pinch of salt with that figure. See, look, what normally happens, and I've seen this in many African countries where I've been. First of all, Nigerians don't like to register with the embassy. I don't want to be misunderstood. I know people have their impressions about what the Nigerian government has done or has not done. I'm just explaining the reality from my point of view, my interactions with Nigerians in some of the places where I have been. Oftentimes, our citizens do not like to register with the embassy. And if you do not register with the embassy, unfortunately, you have a problem like this, how does the embassy even know how many people there are? Okay, so I think this is the first problem. Second problem is you have some Nigerians who travel with illegal documents. And when you travel with an illegal document, you are unlikely to want to go and register with the embassy. If you travel with an illegal document, you are unlikely to want to ask the embassy to help you if you have a problem. So as I speak, if you look at Burkina Faso, Mali, Central African Republic, all the other places where we have problems, DRC, most likely you also find a sizable number of Nigerians in this country who are still not registered with the embassy. So one of the lessons from this crisis is that we need to register.
My apologies, Mr. Luwade.
Just let me finish.
Okay.
So you have also a large number of Nigerian students, in the Sudan. And most of these Nigerian students, some of them are sponsored by state governments. Some went there by themselves. You also have amongst them those who are not inclined to registering themselves. So to arrive at an exact figure as to the number of Nigerian students or Nigerians who are in the Sudan, I think will be difficult. But I assume that the figure which has been given by NITCOM is a figure they've arrived at after careful extrapolation.
Okay, my sincere apologies for taking you back, and I know that Pastor Thompson is also yearning to contribute to this, but to that issue you raised when you said Nigerians don't like to register, whose fault? Because there are many people who have, and I'm pretty sure you are aware of this as well, complain that when they get to the embassies, they're not well received. In fact, in some media missions, of Nigeria in various parts of the world, people take pictures, take videos, and show how decrepit the places are. And getting feedback, getting services from Nigerian missions is sometimes turbulent. In these days of technology, people are expected to make physical appearances in these places. So yes, you are correct. It's possible that, from your experience, Nigerians do not like to get these things done. But on the one hand, they have these hiccups and these bottlenecks that they have to contend with. On the other hand, they are asked to come, at maybe 3 months' time, 4 months' time, and the rest of them. But if you pay a little more money, those allegations are there that you get it to express. So help us understand how we get around that.
Well, yes, it's true. I myself have read, complaints by fellow citizens, of how our embassies in some countries treat them, and I'm not here to speak for the Nigerians. I think that, in fact, there's another matter entirely as to who should be dealing with our foreign policy, who should be speaking, especially in this kind of scenario where we find ourselves. But the only thing I would like to say to the question is that, look, if you find yourself in a country that is in a precarious situation as a foreigner, the minimum you need to do is to at least make sure that your embassy in that place knows you are there. If you are in the United States or if you are in the United Kingdom, maybe you don't need to bother yourself. But if you find yourself in Central African Republic, you find yourself in Mali, you find yourself in Burkina Faso, you find yourself in Sudan, and you do not make yourself available to the embassy, to let the embassy know you are there, because these countries are not in the normal state. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. So the minimum you need to do is fulfill all righteousness, and at least make sure you are documented, okay? And you've played your own role. And then let's take on that embassy if it doesn't do what it is supposed to do when things go wrong. I think that is how I would respond to that question.
Okay. Pastor Thompson, the same thing. At the end of the day, it is the protection of Nigerians in Sudan that we are talking about now, which is very, very paramount, and government officials are working around the clock. We are also playing our part here discussing this issue. So what are the lapses you have seen that need to be covered, and by who? He's talked about the fact that there are some students in Sudan who are there by themselves. Some are sponsored by their state governments. In fact, we understand that some state governments are already going over to bring their own children home by themselves. What do you make of this rescue and evacuation process so far?
Thank you again, Ayo. And I think in this case, we need to put on our thinking cap in Nigeria. The commonality between the citizen of Nigeria and the citizen of Northern Sudan, that is now Sudan, there's something very common between both. The shambolic democracies that are in place have no value for the life of the citizen. Whatever you see going on in Nigeria here is the same sentiment over there. Now, what complicates this further for us in Sudan is that there are two schools of thought planted in Sudan that are dominant, that will affect us in Nigeria if we don't look ahead clearly. The first school of thought is that the black skin is considered to be inferior. This is part of what led to the split of North and South Sudan. The Arab olive skin influence and the Arab supremacist bid that is a global concern has infiltrated Sudan. So first of all, they look down on us as blacks, that we are inferior. Number two, The elephant in the room is that we don't want to accept that between the years 1991 and 1996, Osama bin Laden was in Sudan planting an idea. The idea that has removed the borders. The idea that makes Nigeria the inheritance of people who have been trained over years and have been ideated based on an articulate plan that Nigeria is to become their own territory, as it's just a matter of time. Now, that idea has never been neutralized. And the point now is this, is that if you look at the progression in Nigeria and the shambolic form of democracy that we are running, you will find out that it's either we stand up to who we are the giant of Africa, we are supposed to be the solution nation to Africa. If we stand up on time now, we can solve this problem. If we solve this problem, it starts by, first of all, giving value to the life of our own citizens here. But to do that, the greatest enemy of that is the political class. Because the political class has been very predatory, predictably, not their fault. A politician thinks about the next election. Statesmen, we must think about the next generations. So we are here in a situation now where there's this mass of people who don't regard us as real human beings. They believe that between animals and man, there's something there, and that's who we really are. Secondly, they have a supremacist ideology, which is masked in religion. Unfortunately, bin Laden groomed Nigerians. This is open knowledge. Who met with him? And what we see playing out in Nigeria till today is still the master plan that came out of Sudan. So, if anything, when I look at the number of youths, look, those of us who are above 60 in Nigeria, I can tell you something, we form less than 7% of the total population of this country. So the point is this, why will we not look to the future of our children by rising above the cowardice, the confusion, the chaos, and the corruption to do what has to be done to give value to the life of our children and to make sure that Nigeria remains one. And if we are going to do that, let me conclude by saying this may not be very, but I think when I see Sudan, I see our students, I see our people, it was the same thing in Ukraine, my heart bleeds. I feel like crying. Now, if we're ever going to stop this thing, we're going to have to sit down and accept something. As we are right now, we are a very corrupt nation. If we don't, look, the outgoing president came in to battle corruption. Corruption flawed him, has defeated him, has humiliated him. Many of us who put our trust in Muhammad Buhari when he was coming are weeping on the inside right now. They may be going through all their games as politicians, but people who think beyond politics and beyond the drama, know the effect on the lives of citizens in this country, will realize that not only is it that corruption has flawed this government, it has also created a way for the Hydra, for the hybrid threats. It has created a way for the asymmetrical warfare. It has created a way for the penetration from within, the war of narratives to weaken Nigeria. And what we're about to do right now is even worsening the situation of the future of our children. Nigeria right now, based on the political class of Nigeria, we are about to enthrone, listen to me, the embodiment of corruption in Nigeria is the political class. Now, the embodiment of corruption in Nigeria is about to do something. A country that is already, in fact, immersed in corruption is about to now enthrone corruption officially. Once this happens, listen to me, I want to point out something to you. The former president, Goodluck Jonathan, released a book. How can we in Nigeria be comfortable with a future that talks of a presidency where a person who has been pointed out by a former president to be a promoter of this Boko Haram, whatever, is one heartbeat away from the presidency? And we are saying we're not going to go the way of Sudan. Please, it's teaching time, 6-9. And this is where I'm going to be calling on all God-fearing clerics. I'm talking whether you are a Muslim or you are a Christian. If you are supposed to be a cleric, right now, Nigerians are scared. Nigerians have been, they've been corrupted. But at least the institutions that represent God in the country should be able to stand when it comes to times like this. Samuel Adams, one of the founding contributor to America's foundation, said something. He said, if ever a time should come in America when vain, aspiring, corrupt men shall possess the highest seats. Listen to this. In the government of America, he said, our country will stand in need of its experienced patriots to prevent its win. That is where Nigeria is right now.
All right, let
we
me
have time now.
Yeah.
Yes,
let me ask Mr. Luwake, one of the issues that's come to mind as Pastor Thompson was talking are two issues that I'd like you to speak to very quickly. One, he talked about young people, and data says that there are more than 50, if not 60% of young people populating Africa than there are older people, as he also alluded to. So on the one hand, I'd like you to speak to that, because it would seem like it is one of the areas in which we are being blindsided by the issues arising in the Sudan. What other issues can you point to, areas in which we are being blindsided by these issues, and that if we do not pay attention, it could sweep us as a nation in Nigeria?
The question sounds simple, Ayo, but it's also very difficult in the sense that there are so many ways from which I want to look at it. I think particularly it is worrisome, as Pastor Thompson said. If you look at Nigeria, at the minimum, 70% of our population is below the age of 30. That is extremely terrifying. Now, if you look at, you spoke earlier on, when you were asking a question, you said there's one country between Nigeria and Sudan. Yes, geographically, there's Chad between us and Sudan, but there's also Chad between us and Libya. Libya has already collapsed, and we have seen some of the impact of that on us, especially in the northeast and in other parts of Nigeria where we've had asymmetrical warfare, banditry, and so on. But then, if Sudan collapses, earlier on I spoke about the multiplicity of militia groups, some of which were not properly disbanded. Weapons were not properly retrieved. And if you look at the contiguity of Sudan to Chad to Libya, if you look at what is already playing in Libya with General Khalifa Haftar in Benghazi and his army, which is probably better equipped than the armies of many African countries. General Khalifa tried to overthrow the so-called UN-backed government in Tripoli twice, and we saw the spectacular display of weaponry on television that he lined up when he was trying to take Tripoli. Now, why am I saying this? These groups largely have young people fighting for them. The RSF leader, General Dagalo, in 2018 publicly said that he had about 3,000 RSF fighting with General Khalifa. General Idris Deby of Chad reportedly was killed by a group that temporarily disbanded from General Khalifa and invaded Chad and went back. All of these groups have young people. And from what we have seen with Boko Haram insurgency as well, most of those fighting are young people. That tells us something. If we do not do something about the future of the young people of Nigeria and of Africa, we are going to witness worse things, right? But now it is up to the power elite, the political elite, to read the signs and to be matured enough to take the right steps now to prevent that from happening. And I'll add, by way of conclusion, that yes, I agree with Pastor Thompson that the Federal Republic of Nigeria has not been playing its role. It is strange, and I say this again with all sense of responsibility, that our best foreign policy years were under the military. It is strange. There's a responsibility placed on this country by providence, by God, by whatever you want to call it, that we need to play a role. And it begins with our political elite realizing that and doing the right thing.
But to that policy also, you made a statement the other time, who should be saying what, who should be addressing what, especially concerning this evacuation process. Because we're hearing from the Federal Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we're hearing from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, we're hearing the voice of the chairman of NITCOM, we're hearing the voice of the National Emergency Management Agency, and a number of others like that are playing one role or the other. Do you think that's a good way to go, or there is a need for some streamlining?
No, I don't think it's a good way to go. Again, I'm saying this with all sense of responsibility. I don't want to be misunderstood, because someone might think I am castigating. I'm not castigating anyone. In a crisis situation, there has to be a clear chain of command. There has to be a clear chain of command. Our foreign policy is managed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Nigerian Diaspora Commission has been legally empowered to cater to the interests of Nigerians in diaspora, and it has been doing a good job. But in a crisis situation where relationship with states is very important, I think the lead agency should be the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The spokesperson in the whole of this matter should be the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I read in the papers one or two officials, not of the Foreign Ministry, saying certain things, especially about a particular Western country trying to evacuate its citizens, and saying that country came under fire. You don't make a statement like that. That can rupture relations. This is why it's good to allow the diplomats to speak. Besides, the embassy in a country is the one that supposedly has a list of the citizens. It's the one relating with all the arms of that state, which is its host government. So that embassy is in the best position to articulate what is going on and transmit that to the foreign ministry. The Diaspora Commission is doing well, but it should do its job without necessarily being so visible. You know, NEMA also has a role. It doesn't really have to be visible. Let the students or the citizens who are trapped know who to contact, know the person who, let them not have this feeling that there are 4 or 5 people or 4 or 5 agencies. Who do we talk to? Who do we contact? Who is organizing evacuation? Who is doing what? We don't need that now. All of them have been working well, but coordination is important, and I think it should be led by the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
But then you also identify the responsibility for the embassy, the Nigeria's embassy in Sudan. No one seems to be hearing the voice of that embassy in any way, manner, shape, or form, not even from the High Commissioner or Ambassador there.
Because it's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who should speak for the embassy. The embassy reports to the ministry. And I'm wondering where the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is in the whole of all this.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Mr. Luwaki. But let me ask Pastor Thompson, as we close on this issue, well, we've started this conversation, this program this morning by talking about an agenda for the incoming administration. If you would label an agenda within the next 45 seconds, what are the bullet points, things that need to be done urgently so things don't get any worse? You already began to talk about them anyway.
Okay, let me say this. There's an African proverb that says that if somebody accuses you of being a dog, you should not respond by barking or biting the person. Nigeria has systemic problems. We are about to officially enthrone corruption in a nation that is already riddled with corruption. We can see the future clearly. Right now, I believe that the onus should be, right now we know the political class cannot do anything. The systemic problem has tackled them. I would rather call on those who keep the moral gates of the country to talk about introducing a more dynamic and tropicalized form of democracy as an emergency.
Okay.
Right now.
Okay.
More than anything else.
Well, a number of suggestions have been made along that line. There are those who are asking for us to domesticate our democracy. What that means, I guess we'll wait to see. Thank you so much for your perspectives this morning. Eladi Thompson is a security analyst. Thank you so much for your time, as well as Bayo Oluwake, who is consulting research fellow at the African Resource Development Center. Thank you so much for your time, gentlemen. We're back after now to talk about an issue that's been a problem for us and in terms of building collapses. How do we curtail that? More on that when we return from this break.
can use the messed up, then I'm the mess you need. If you can use a failure, I failed so many times and made so many mistakes, yeah. I wanna get it right. And now my focus is your purpose, laying my life at your feet. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Take every part of me, take all I'll ever be. I surrender totally. Lord, you are my destiny. Take control of my life, my hopes, my goals, my dreams. Yeah. I surrender totally. Lord, you are my destiny. Yeah, yeah. You are my destiny. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. I know that I'm not worthy. Sometimes I lose my way. Still you show me mercy, yeah. I'm blinded by your grace. Your love is so amazing. From all my sin and shame, you saved me. A new life you gave me, Father, and now my focus, I'm laying my life at your feet, Jesus. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Take every part, take every part, take all.
Well, thank you so much for staying with us. That picture is not pleasant, is it? You see, stakeholders in the built environment have concluded that the greatest culprit in the rising incidences of building collapses are governments at all levels have shown that they do not have enough capacity to hold the incidents across the country. Now, a few days after the 7-story building collapsed on Banana Island, Lagos, another building caved in through, even though it was without a casualty, in Ladipo area, Ladipo Luo, that's Apapa area of Lagos. A 2-story building under construction collapsed, giving indication that all efforts to ameliorate collapse of buildings in Lagos have not yielded enough fruit until now. As was reported, a bolt of lightning hit the building before it came down at about 9 a.m. on the said day. Two people will be joining us, but let's begin with Engineer Elizabeth Oricha, who is MD Jelip Concept Limited. She's former Director, Satellite Towns Development Department of the Federal Capital Territory Administration. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, madam. Well, we've only mostly, yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we've mostly been hearing of these collapses in Lagos. From your experience and professionally, what's the situation like in other parts of the country when we talk about building collapses?
It's really traumatizing. It's a very bad experience that in the 21st century we are still having so much collapse of buildings, simple structures like we are seeing. And it's sad that it's happening, but I hope with all these discussions here and there, things will change. People will get to know what they should do and how they should approach their development so that we don't keep having such collapses.
Or that the issue a number of people have raised is about whether or not government is doing enough to put a stop to it. A number of buildings collapsed within very short days. We've talked about 2 this morning. I heard about 4 in all within a very short time of about 2-3 weeks or thereabout. I can't quite confirm that now, but that was the information that was making the rounds. These 2 were in Lagos. There was one in Ibadan and a number of other places like that. There are those who point at governments not being able to curtail the trend. How do you react to that?
Definitely, government has to do a lot more, but I think that the developers should take responsibility for their developments, for their properties. It's just like blaming government for a failed health. Yes, you may say the structures are not there for people to access, but if I'm having malaria now, I will not stay in my house and expect somebody to come and, take me to the hospital. If you want to put up a structure that will last, that will stand a test of time, as a developer, you should do the right thing first. Yes, as a way of sanctions and punitive measures, I think we need to still do much more as a nation so that when people, are punished for their inactions, I think others will learn lessons and they will change. So I agree with you that there has to be more, punitive measures on the part of the developer, on the part of professionals that are involved, in the supervision of buildings.
The process of monitoring. What is the process? And from your experiences, having worked, with a government agency, you might be able to tell us what is supposed to be the process, and in what ways do people sidestep these processes that evoke the kind of issue we're talking about now, almost intractably?
Okay, if you want to put up a structure, for instance, you get the architect design the structure for you based on your the brief you must have given the architect, and then the structural engineer will do a design that will make the building stable. We design for stability as engineers, and then you put all the drawings together and submit to approving authority. In Abuja, for instance, we call it Development Control Department. You submit to the approving authority. They have the professionals there that go through the design and confirm that it's adequate. If there's any lapse or if there's any deficiency anywhere, they point it out. And then you get the drawings approved after passing through the normal stages of checks. So when that approval comes to the developer's hand, you are expected to comply with that design. But what happens most times is that sometimes there are lack of compliance to approved designs, and it's part of the reasons why buildings collapse. For instance, a building is approved drawing you have is for 2 suspended floors, and they go ahead and add 1 or 2 more, or it's for a residential building, and they go ahead and, use it for commercial. Those are issues that, affect the stability or durability of the structures.
There is a lot more on that, but as all of, thankfully, I mentioned this earlier, that my colleague was locked down in traffic. We have secured her release from the traffic, and she's here with me this morning.
Good morning.
I hope how was your incarceration?
Oh, my word. I mean, I've never seen traffic like that before. And thanks for asking. No, I don't live in Kuchiwenji. I do live in Lagos. I mean, it's taking me from 6:15 to, 10:30 to get here.
Okay.
That tells you how much that traffic is out there this morning. It is simply crazy. And the deadline for completion of that highway is tomorrow.
Well, miracles still happen.
Oh.
It's not tomorrow
right.
yet. So, yeah.
So, guys, we'll wait for the miracle to happen and for that job to be completed by tomorrow.
Okay. That's if that's possible, but hey, go ahead.
I'm here. Is the commissioner ready now?
Yes, the commissioner is ready for us now.
The Commissioner for Information and Strategy, Lagos State, Mr. Gbenga Omotosho. Good morning and thank you for joining us. Now, the engineer has mentioned approvals from government before these buildings go up. And then she also said that sometimes people just sidestep those approvals, add floors that were not approved by government and stuff like that.
Don't complicate it. So let's go back to what we were doing before.
Mr. Mososho, whose duty is it to ensure that those approvals are adhered to?
Well, I do not know whether you can hear me, madam.
Clearly.
But I can hear you clearly. I've been trying to connect my video, but it seems not to be connecting. So there is what we call a building control agency. That is the one that approves all these in charge of buildings under the Ministry of Fiscal Planning. So those are the people, and they comprise experts. They have experts there, experts in the built industry, engineers, structural engineers, and all manner of civil engineers. So they are the people who have the human resources and capability to approve buildings.
But the challenge that being raised here, Mr. Motosho, I don't know if your office or the Lagos State government gets these complaints that people get approvals, but as the engineer Richard mentioned, they get approval for X number of floors, but then they put an additional floor or they adjust the building structure, building design on the go in violation of the approvals that they got. Is that something you can confirm?
That is true, and that is criminal, and that is why part of the reasons why buildings are going down. You get approval to have 4 floors, and then all of a sudden you raise it up to 6, whereas the foundation can carry only 4, and that's what you presented to the authorities for approval. So by the time you raise it to 6, and then the foundation can no longer carry it, or something just goes wrong, then the building goes down. So it happens in most cases. That is the cause of buildings that are going down, and it's criminal.
When it comes to high rises, Mr. Motosho, how much is the state involved in the construction of it?
Well, we are involved up to the level of trying to ensure that there is compliance with what the builder would like to build. You want to build a 6-story building, and then our engineers, they look at the drawings, and then they go to the site to check what is going on. But if they find any infraction, then they mark the building and ask you to stop working. And at the point of being asked to stop working, people will behave as if they have complied. Then they will go and find a way either to go and be doing construction at night, a way of shielding the site from the government. And before the government goes back there, something snaps, and then buildings go down, and that is just a problem.
Well, perhaps that also raises a question as well, Mr. Motosho. You said that, you have confirmed that these things do happen. People unseal sealed construction sites, and they continue work, and things happen. You said it is criminal. From experience, from the practices of government, from the data of government, how many people have been arrested or prosecuted because of this kind of criminality that you talk about?
Yeah, the Ministry of Justice has a record of people who have been taken to court to face the law because of infractions in building codes, because of trying to cut corners, because of in actual fact, a building falls and somebody is held liable for that. So they have a record of such people, which I don't have often now.
Mrs. Oricha, yes. Sometimes substandard material is used, and in these hard times, I mean, one shouldn't be surprised that constructors, builders try to cut corners. Whose duty is it to ensure the quality of stuff used, especially for high rises?
Well, we have the Standard Organization of Nigeria that should monitor the quality of materials that are used in the construction industry. For instance, the reinforcement, the iron rods that you know. You discover that if you get to market and you're looking for 16 mm, what we call iron 16, what you get most of the time is 12 or 14, and they write 16 on it. And meanwhile, the engineer has designed his structure for 16 mm, or you design to use 12, and what is available is 10. The criminality there is even that even though they know it's 10, they write 12 on the body. So except you have a caliper to check, what you're buying, you may never know that they are giving you 10 for 12. So I think that the organizations that is responsible for monitoring these things should be up and doing. And then the professional that is using it, please, as much as possible, get basic like a caliper to measure the diameter of the iron rod you're using. Ensure that the quality of concrete, if the quality recommended is 25, Newton per millimeter squared, for instance, grade 25, we call it, and ensure that there is quality measures put in place on the site that quality of concrete is what you are using on the site. So it is both the organization that is supposed to monitor and the professionals on site. You should ensure that you have a double, monitor on what is available for you to use on site.
Yeah, the agency can only monitor the market. But on a building site, the person, the agency does not come to the building sites to examine what things are being used, do they?
Exactly.
So they can only monitor what is going into the market. But the guys who are going to now buy the wrong things and bring to the site. Somebody has responsibility for examining the materials to be used based on the design of the building, right?
That's correct.
So who does that on site?
I have in my practice, on site, had to send samples of, the reinforcements that I'm going to use to laboratories or to check the strength, because sometimes you want to use 425, and what you are having is less than 400 or 350 strength of the iron rod. So when you are into a critical construction, as a professional, you should make extra effort to ensure that the material you are using is what is specified in the design you have. But then, I think there should still be, I agree with you that the organization that should monitor this quality may not even know what gets to the market. Then who is to be blamed? From the factory where it's coming from, up to the point it gets to the market, somebody should monitor the quality. You can't, we shouldn't have excuses for having substandard materials in the market. It may not be easy for everyone to keep taking samples to the laboratory to go and check. The organizations that should monitor this quality and ensure that the right thing gets from the factory to the market should please help us, because we are losing lives, we are losing resources, we are losing credibility as a nation.
Mr. Masasha, now, do you think that the steps being taken by government after these collapses happen, do you think they get adequate publicity such that any crooked person who has it in the back of their mind to do some kind of cutting of corners that may end up in a building collapse, such that that kind of person is called to order?
I think all these steps that we take after every unfortunate incident gets adequate publicity, especially among people in the beauty industry. They know that the government says this about what has happened, the government says that about what has happened, and it's a signal to them that if they do anything that is strong that endanger the lives of Lagosians, that the government can easily go after them. But unfortunately, the greed factor sets in. A man obtains an approval to build 4 floors, and then he gets it gets oversubscribed, and then he thinks he can put more floors on it, and the man feels that he's now an expert because he has been building and building. He's a very well-known name in the industry, and then he begins to do things on his own without inviting experts who are registered with the Council of Registered Engineers or Structural Engineers, and then all of a sudden it happens again. So it's the human factor that is majorly the problem. It's not because the government has not been playing its own part. The people who have been taken to court, the people know them. And then they are people who are generally well known in the industry. And all the steps the government is taking, there's no step that the government is taking that doesn't carry along the professionals in the industry. But as we are talking now, there are certain things that the government is doing to ensure that we get stiffer on all of these things. We get firmer on all of these things in ensuring that people obey the law, because that is the major cause of it. People don't obey the law. They don't want to, they are just want to perpetrate illegality. Unknown to them, they are endangering the lives of Lagosians. So I feel that what we are doing, people know about it, and they will continue to know about it, especially all of the new programs that we are bringing out now to stop these kind of calamities.
Well, Mr. Motosho, perhaps the question a number of people might be asking is how stiff are these penalties? We know, of course, that government took a very strong decision, was it in September last year, when the Commissioner for Physical Planning and Urban Development had to resign over a collapsed building that took place at the time. But then it's also on record, which I'm pretty sure that your office is aware of, that data from the Lagos State branch of the Building Collapse Prevention Guild recorded, says that a staggering 115 incidents of building collapses happened within the last 10 years. But guess what? The years 2019 to 2022 recorded the highest number of building collapses in the last decades, each with 20 different cases in each of these years. That is definitely something that concerns government and is something that no one is going to even shy away from. So the question then abounds as to whether or not those measures being taken by government are stiff enough to instill deterrence so people do not do it. Even from among officials of government who are supposed to perform the functions that Engineer Richard has described the other time, as well as the engineers and the contractors themselves.
Well, you are right to say that where the measures may be seen as not stiff enough. And I said that the human element, the greed factor, when people just feel that it's an opportunity for them to make money, not considering that they are endangering the lives of Lagosians, that one is also there. But now the Lagos State government is coming up with what we call a certified accreditor program. That certified accreditor program is the one that will bring together everybody in the industry as a team that can monitor from day one when you want to submit your drawing, that you want to build a building. All of the people who are in charge, the civil engineers, the structural engineers, they will be there. There will be a pool of experts to draw from that will be okaying all these drawings and following up, on how the building is going, supervising the building of any building, especially the ones that are above 4 floors. And I think when you have this kind of pool of experts, this kind of a problem will reduce or will disappear.
Well, Engineer Richard, perhaps this goes back to the professionals such as yourself in this regard. Do you see a role for professionals? The Commissioner for Information and Strategy in Lagos has just said that there is a measurement tool being used now it's coming up by government to ensure that even from the position, from the stage of documentation, you get it right professionally. Is there a role for professional bodies? We know that there's a Building Collapse Prevention Guild. Such organizations as that, civil engineers, construction engineers, and all. Is there a role for them in all of these? I ask because we know that doctors have a way of ensuring that they don't have quirks among themselves. Lawyers have the MBA, for instance, to ensure that you don't even practice, as significantly as you might if there wasn't any regulations, in place. Do you see a role for engineers or the engineering professional practitioners in preventing building collapses all over the nation?
Ayola, there's a great role that the professional bodies have to play, and they are playing it. And I don't know, from the records of building collapses, if you get to site, you hardly have issues of maybe, for instance, like I belong to the engineering profession, where the lapse is on the engineer. Some of those sites are not properly manned by professionals. Some of the sites. That's why I said the other time that the developers have to take responsibility for their... If you're going to put 100 million, for God's sake, in a project, what does it take you to set aside 5 to 10% of that to ensure a qualified professional is engaged to supervise and ensure that the right thing is done on your side?
Madam, before you continue, my apologies.
The professional body...
My sincere apologies, madam.
...ensures that
my apologies, madam.
Engineering professionals in the field are properly trained.
Can you hear me?
And are,
My apologies, sincere apologies for butting in. You said that there are some sites that are not manned by engineers, and you also cited now that some of those sites are worth 100 million naira. Who polices such investments? Who polices such? Who should police such projects or such sites, such construction sites, when there are no professionals?
Just like the commissioner said while he was talking, he said the professionals are there, and they send out sometimes, like stop work order, and at night these people come back to do. I think that what should be doing going forward is when there's a default or lack of compliance to instructions that is given by government officials or professional bodies, there should be a sanction on the developer not to go ahead or not to even, in any way complete his structure. Because if he's not complying with the instructions given by the professional body or the government organization as a result of his sharp practices, and they don't have the capacity to stop him or to stop the work, then that's why we keep having these issues. The truth is, the sites, I cannot go to every site, or professionals cannot go to every site to know who and who is on the site. The developer who wants to develop his structure should look out for quality, registered, experienced professional to engage on his side to protect his investment, to protect lives that he's providing that, building for.
Mrs. Oricha, we discussed this matter with we've discussed this matter with a number of engineers, and they put the buck squarely at the table of structural engineers. from your experience, are structural engineers, if they have a professional body, are they sufficiently concerned to be looking at this matter critically and calling all their members to order so that this kind of thing does not continue to happen?
Sure, there's, I don't know, I keep saying, I don't know at any point in time where any professional has ever been, found wanting professionally on any side that is not, sanctioned. On every side, if the right professionals are there, I keep repeating this because we have a lot of quacks, a lot of people called engineers on site that are actually not engineers. I tell you, you go to site a mason. In fact, at a time, one day we were supervising a project and somebody we know is a mason. We got there and they are calling him engineer. We had to say, engineer from where? So I think that the right thing is for the professional body surely puts a lot of sanctions on ground for any engineer that defaults. And we have had a few issues. But on a general note, quacks, people who are not properly trained to handle construction of multi-story buildings are the ones there. And that's why we keep having the issues we are having. Where there was something I was reading the other day. They made an analysis there in Lagos that most out of 100 buildings that collapse, or let's say 10 buildings that collapse, 7 are by private owners. The others, maybe like 20 for 2 for government or corporate organization, only 1 for a big organization. The truth is, these private developers don't want to pay for professional services. And that is why they keep having the issues they have on the site.
Okay. Well, there's this question that's just coming from an email, and it's for you, Mr. Motosho. It's from Magnus Okoro, who sent us an email, says, I want to ask Mr. Igbenga Motosho why Lagos State Physical Planning Permit Authority and Lagos State Building Control Agency staff collude with illegal developers even when their attentions are called to illegal structures. It goes further to say that most times a mere renovation permit are changed to a building structural change without a new building approval, a new building drawing approval, because these 2 Lagos State government agency staff are compromised. A visit to Lekki Phase 1, Lagos State, will confirm these assertions. So even points to an example. How do you respond?
Well, I would like to thank the man who sent in that
Magnus
question.
Okoro is his name.
Yeah, Mr. Magnus Okoro. Very nice observation. But in any human environment, there is you cannot. When you have when you have good people, you must also have a very bad people. The guys in charge of fiscal planning and then building control agency, they are very good professionals. But among them, you will also have people who will not be of a good character. And those are the ones who may be doing the kind of thing that he has mentioned. But if you look at it generally, all of the buildings that are falling, they are buildings that have been marked by these same people who are said to be corrupt and all of that, who said, stop order, don't work here. We put a seal on such a buildings and padlock the site. And yet, people who are greedy collude with professionals who are not true to their own profession to go and start reconstructing all these buildings until they fall, and then the public will know about them. Look at the one in Apapa a few days ago. It was already marked, stop order. The one on Banana Island, it was not approved. So these are things that, and then our own people too, who we also constitute themselves into a stumbling block, then the government is trying to do its own monitoring duties, and then they will go to estates that are gated, and then government officials will not be allowed to go into such estates. And by the time the government officials will plan to go back there, you see that something has happened. So the man may not be lying, but that is not the general conduct of all the people in LABSCA or physical planning. If you look at it, mostly they are people who are of very good conduct, who are of nice character, and who are thorough professionals. But among these also people, you will have some who are very weak in character and who may not be trusted.
Well, I see that there are numbers to those sealed buildings from the videos that we put on air the other time for people to see, to validate some of the things that you're saying. So if you can educate people on what the process is, that when a building is sealed, then there is a number put there. What does that mean? And if and when the building site is unsealed, how do people know that it was government that unsealed it so they don't keep calling back?
Well, what happens is that when you see a building as a government official, a building that you suspect may not have had an approval, and then you go and check, and the building has no approval, then you put that mark there. And that mark shows that whoever is building there should come to the office of physical planning to come and find out why the building was marked and bring all the papers. And in most cases, you find out that these guys, they don't have papers at all to show. They just started building, or they are building what they did not tell the authorities that they wanted to build in terms of height or in terms of size. So, and when the authorities ask them to go and do certain things, they give them conditions. Once they fulfill those conditions, the authorities will go back there and unseal the building and wipe out the marks that are there. But you see that in most cases, it's either the authorities are not allowed to go in there to check again, or people just go at night to start building with the collusion of fraudulent professionals, and then something happens and the whole world knows. Most of the buildings that are falling in Lagos, 99% of them did not have any approval.
Mr. Masasha, what happens to the owner of a building site who goes to unseal the seal of the state?
It's a very serious matter. It's a criminal offense, and a couple of people have been brought before the law for doing that. They have paid the penalties, and like I said, the Ministry of Justice has a record of such infractions. Once the government goes to a building and says that the building is sealed, nobody has the power to go and unseal it. It's a criminal matter. And then we don't take candidate to that in Lagos.
And when a building is unsealed, how do people confirm that it was government that unsealed it?
Because that seal will no longer be there, and then the one written on the building is wiped off.
Okay.
And of course, some of the builders are kind enough to display their approval.
Okay. All right, Madam, this one is for you. I'm sure that we'll also take it up with the commissioner, but structural engineers and builders are two professionals largely responsible for the stability of buildings being constructed. This is from an email by Abiodun Sonif, all the way from Port Harcourt. He goes further to say that the strict passing of the national building codes into laws and its enforcement will assist in minimizing these collapses. Do you agree?
Quite well.
How significantly do you think that will play? Go ahead, madam.
Sorry.
I said, how significantly do you think passing of the national building codes into laws will help to cut down on the building collapses across the nation?
It will significantly help to, curb a lot of these issues, because when that code is in place, every professional, every one involved in the built environment will know their boundaries, will know what they are expected to do. And even the developer will know his boundary or what he's expected to do. So it will go a long way if that is passed to curb the collapses we are having in the built in the collapses we're having in the country.
Is that something that the state government can take up, Mr. Motosho, or is it something that only the federal government can handle?
I didn't get what she said.
No. I'm talking about the email that Mr. Abiodun Sani sent in, that structural engineers and builders are largely responsible for building collapses, and that if we pass national building codes into laws, it'll help to, and enforce them, it'll help to minimize these collapses.
I can't just put the blame on at the doorstep of some professionals. We are all guilty. I mean, most of the guys who are in that industry today, they are not professionals. They are people who just had money to invest in that industry. And because they have been there for longer and they have seen how professionals supervise their buildings, they now think they can cut corners because of their greed. And then nobody cares if any building does not go down. But once a building goes down, that is when we begin to do all these speculations and postulations and all of that. So I do not want to blame structural engineers or civil engineers on this. I mean, we are all guilty. All of us. Those of us who find people who are constructing buildings and we see that they are not using professionals and we keep quiet. Those of us who allow people to bring in materials in the dead of the night to start constructing, we are all guilty. Those of us who say that a building is seed and all of a sudden the people go there to open it and begin to work and we keep quiet, we are all guilty. So I do not put the blame at the doorstep of those professionals only.
Madam, you wanted to add something?
Ayola? Yes.
Did you want to add something to that?
Yes, please. I didn't quite get the question he asked initially, and I think I want to agree with with the commissioner that the collapse is not totally at the doorstep of the builders or the structural engineers. Just like I said initially, that the developers should take responsibility for the investment they want to make in the building industry. So it's totally, like he said, everyone is involved. The developer, the organization that should watch on the quality of materials in the market, the professional on the site that should ensure that what they are using or the right thing is being done on the site. So it's not just the engineer or the builder. Everyone is involved in ensuring that, the collapses we are having is minimized.
Madam, in talking about the reasons, the many reasons for buildings collapsing, there's also talk about the proper investigation of the subsoil. Please, can you just explain that to us briefly?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. That's very, very correct, because the soil actually bears the weight, the load from the roof to the foundation. And if the soil does not have enough capacity, what we call bearing capacity, if the soil is weak, the bearing capacity will be so low, and so it will not be able to, carry the load that is being transferred to it. So it is always very, very necessary that before, especially high-rise buildings, is put in place, quality assurance, that is the assurance that this soil on which we're going to put this structure has, is properly prepared for the foundation to be able to, for the foundation of the building to be able to carry the load and transfer to the soil under it. So soil tests, soil investigation is very important in the issues of bearing the load that is transferred to it.
What do you mean by weak soil?
A weak soil is, like I said, the soil that it does not have the capacity to bear the load that is being transferred to it.
Can one tell that by looking at
laterite, what is topsoil, what is, waterlogged areas, and if this entire load is estimated from the roof, that is supposed to be transferred to this soil, and the soil is weak, is waterlogged, is not strong enough, it doesn't have the capacity, we call it bearing capacity, to bear that load, then the soil is weak.
Well, Madam, it would seem like you just raised another issue. Let me just quickly read this email from Dr. Peter Idialu, who says drastic improvement is required in monitoring and enforcement by the government officials using modern-day technology to ensure an effective building construction process. Well, you may want to speak to that, but the issue you just raised now about soil testing before you build a house, some people have bought their land now only for building, and they plan to build 3 floors of 2 flats each. Now, you have told them that they need to first of all go and test the soil. The soil they did not test before they bought. Now, it's like you're asking them for extra costs.
There's issue.
So how does that person go about that? Like, expecting them to, some extra costs that they may or may not have factored in.
Ayola, that's why we are grateful for this, for devoting so much time for this discussion, so that people will know what they are expected to do. You just don't, because you have money from somewhere and you want to build X number of buildings and X number of floors, and you just, get somebody design and you start building. Proper processes need to be followed. If you want to put up high-rise, you must have an assurance of the strength of the soil that will carry that building. There must be that assurance. So that's why I said it's good that we are bringing up all this, so that people who want to construct, please don't just go to site and start building, especially if you are going beyond 1 floor, 2 floors. You must know the strength on which that building is going to stand.
Well, it would seem like Engineer Akeju agrees with you here. He says via email that the solution, or rather one of the solutions, is to take delivery of building projects like production process, where you have quality control laboratories on site. It is not about site only, but soil testing. If you do wrong soil testing, you are bound to get wrong foundation or footing, or it may be called, wrong foundation or footing, as it may be called. That's from Engineer Ola Akeju. But Mrs. Ayorinde is drawing attention to something here. She says, this one is for the commissioner. It says, he just wants to alert us through this medium on the danger of buildings coming up haphazardly around Abulioja in Akoka, close to Unilag. All the old bungalows are being turned into high-rise buildings, all crammed together with each other and for commercial purposes. I wonder what can happen if there's a fire outbreak. The government should visit this area and avert danger on these streets. How do you respond, sir?
Well, I think that's a very good observation. That is what I'm saying by what I mean by saying that all of us, it's our duty to ensure that this kind of unfortunate incidents don't happen anymore in our society. So I will escalate this matter to my colleagues in fiscal planning to pay attention to Abule Oja. People are not supposed to build. We find out that when they go there now, most of these buildings may have been marked, they may have no approval, but people will just go and be building at night when nobody is watching. It's unfortunate that, the capacity to be at every building site all of the time is no longer there. It's not there, and I do not see anywhere in the world where it is there. It is all a question of character and expertise. Once the experts themselves, they lack character, there is nothing anybody can do about it. It's very, very tough. It's only the law that can now come in. And unfortunately, most of the time when you expect a deterrence, people are punished. Others do not seem to learn about it. They are blindfolded by the greed of what they are going to make out of every development that they go into. And they do not want to ensure that the rule of law plays its role in what they are doing.
Well, Engineer Motoshaw, all of a sudden I made you an engineer. Well, Mr. Motoshaw,
that's why.
the question that comes to mind around that is, why give so many approvals then? The last time we had a conversation around this, and one of our guests told us that at the last count, Lagos State had 35,000 active, or what they call live building sites already as we speak. So one then wonders if the capacity to monitor is not there, why give so many approvals? I'm just wondering if there is something if that's something to observe.
Yeah, the question is because of the economic importance of Lagos. In real estate, Lagos is the fastest growing, not even only in Africa, but one of the fastest growing city states all around the world. Everybody is coming to Lagos to invest in property. Foreigners are there, local entrepreneurs are there. So you have so many people asking for approval at the same time. But the question is not just because you are granting approval. It's because people are afraid to play their own role. You know, people are afraid to, they are forgetting about character in whatever they are doing. Before Lagos State government approves any building construction, there must have been a thorough examination of the application, and by experts who will now say, okay, people can go and build. But it is not at every stage of the building that you have a government official coming to monitor, because people are expected to play their own role too. It's only when they do not play that role that you see that we have problems. Like I said, hardly can you find a building that has fallen in Lagos that was not marked, either for contravening structural problems, rules, or for just, what the last person who said that he may call that facade building. So it is not just a question of having the capacity to monitor. What the monitors are doing, they are trying their best. Because every building that has gone, hardly can you find one that was not marked. There have been instances of officials physically going to arrest people on site to stop them from working.
Okay.
And then people who are bent on just perpetrating illegality working at night when nobody is in there. And then the collusion of people who live in estates, especially where the rich and the powerful live, that you don't allow government officials to come in at any time to come and inspect buildings. And I think all of us are learning in a very hard way now, like what happened on Banana Island the other day.
Okay, Mr. Motoshaw, we've fast run out of time, so I'd just like you to take your last word in just one sentence, if you can manage that.
Well, my last word is that all of us, we should see this as the duty of all of us. The government is ready to champion it, that buildings should no longer be going down through our certified accreditor program, which will involve all experts. We have a pool of experts who will be looking at everything right from the approval stage up to the completion of buildings. There will no longer be the question of lack of human capacity to monitor all these buildings. But like I have said, we should see something. When we see something, you say something.
Say something.
All of us is for the safety of all of us.
Engineer Elizabeth Oricha, your last word, please.
Yes, thank you. Like I keep saying, please, the developers should take responsibility for their actions. And then the professionals on site, please, and like what we say in engineering, you make mistake, your mistake buries you. So please ensure that when you are on a site, quality control, quality assurance, you don't joke with it. But let everyone ensure those who are supposed to ensure that standard materials are on site should please ensure they do their work. Developers, professionals, organizations that should monitor what comes into market for use in the built industry, everyone should be alert. Thank you very much for having me.
Engineer Elizabeth Oricha, former Director, Satellite Towns Development Department, Federal Capital Territory Administration, FCTA. as well as the Commissioner for Information and Strategy, Lagos State, Mr. Benga Omotosho. Thank you both for your time this morning. I'd like to just close this segment by quoting what you just said. Your mistake buries you. We'll be right back with another interesting conversation. Thank you for joining us.
Anybody way won't fight you, may they come, they already know. I'll be right beside you, like the wall of Jericho. They don't know, they don't know, they don't know what's going on. Monagiso, 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 my baby boo. I'll be a soldier for you, I'm getting better in Kung Fu. You should know I got you, and you don't need to guide me too. I'll be right beside you in anything that you do. If you ever need saving, I will be running to you, running, running, running to you. I'll be running to you, running, running, running to you. Anywhere that you go to, running, running, running to you. I'll be running to you, running, running, running to you. Anywhere that you go to.
When I'm looking for trouble, it's cause I know that I got you. Wanting more best everybody, oh oh. And it's because of your kung fu. And anytime that I'm out of control, you hold me down. You never, never let go. Yeah. Munagiso, 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 my baby boo. See all the battles you'll be fighting, and I'll be right there with you. I may be small, but I'm mighty, and I go run out for you. And anybody ways I be, yeah, don't be you, call it I be, alright. And if I ever need saving, I'll be running to you.
Running, running, running to you. I'll be running to you, running, running, running to you. Anywhere that you go to, running, running, running to you. I'll be running to you, running, running, running to you. Anywhere that you go to. You don't need to worry, anything you want, anytime you call me, baby, I go answer you. And if you want me coming to you, I go come to you. Tell me what you want, baby, say I'm not in my
Hmm. 21st century parenting.
I took a deep breath, and you took a deep breath as well. 21st century parenting. Okay.
You know, the last time, each time I think about that thing, you know, the first thing that comes to mind? Slate and iPad.
Shock. Slate and shock.
Yes.
Which is under their arm.
Yes.
We are going to lesson.
It was not as what's the word now, as addictive as the iPad.
Well, that's the nature of these devices. You know, my children used to ask me when they were younger, what did you all do when you were young? There was no television, there was no iPad, there were no games. So what did you do?
We thank them.
You all must have been very bored. And I said, on the contrary, we were far from bored. We had our fun listening to Tales by Moonlight, playing 10-10.
Well, it would seem like we have a live event to come anytime now, but let's get on this conversation because those issues are very, very daunting.
So if you're a Generation X, you know, born around the 60s and the 70s, you're probably wondering how you're going to parent your children in the middle of all the chaos that they live in today.
Yeah.
All those devices take up the time. They have games. In fact, there comes a point where you have to monitor the kind of games that they play on their game consoles. But then we have somebody, a family therapist, who will tell us all about that. It's my pleasure to welcome Amina Yunus Ali. Good morning.
Good morning, Mom. Good morning, sir.
Thank you for
Are
coming.
we crying wolf for nothing?
Well, I think we are crying wolf a little bit too late.
Oh.
We are about a decade.
It's not even the crying that is the matter. It's the timing of the crying.
The timing.
Okay.
I think we got into the rhythm of our reality about a few decades beyond when the reality hit us, really. So right now,
So we're a few decades behind schedule.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's like an asteroid coming from space.
How bad is
and
it?
we're just really realizing that this is hitting us hard. Well, it's not unsalvageable. That's what I would say.
That's the good part.
Yeah, the good part is it's not unsalvageable. Okay. But if we really want to get into it, we need to get into it fast. We need to get into it with strategy. You know, it was amazing listening to the engineer and the commissioner speaking about building collapse and how it's affecting the society, how lives are being lost. Souls are being lost by the collapse of parenting in the 21st century. Families are breaking down, homes are disintegrating. And of course, what we are seeing right now in the space of addiction, just like you were saying as we were starting, that we're not addicted to our slates and our chalkboards and things like that, because there was enough time and enough people present for us to be addicted to one another. But right now, children are addicted to devices because there are a lot less presence of humans, a lot less connection, even as technologically driven as we are right now. We are losing the human factor. That is actually the bulk of parenting.
Madam Therapist, life is the way it is today. Father has to go to work, mother has to go to work, because we have children to bring up. We have expenses. So we're not paying as much attention as we should to our children. What are the options left for us in this rat race life that we live today?
Yeah, it will seem like the hustle culture is unavoidable, but I dare say that with proper planning, I think where we missed it is the fact that we assumed that the rat race is something that is a norm. We did not put enough shock absorber. It's just like what the engineer was talking about, that we are building houses right now, but we are not testing the soils to know if the houses are good enough. So we're having homes, we are building families, but we are not certain if the people who are bringing up these children are well equipped to raise them. And it's not just about the funds. It's not just about, it's easy to succumb into the thought that it is the finances and the economic infrastructure that is going to determine how well a child is going to be brought up. But the fact remains that how well a child is depends on the two people involved in the family. So if you are both working, does that mean that you both cannot be present?
Yes.
Right.
Another thing is, even when mother was at home, not working, bringing up the children, she brings up two children the same way. One ends up being a professor, and the other one ends up being an armed robber.
And that's where the strategy and the process comes in, because it's no longer
about that.
So it's no longer about just assuming that the way I was brought up is sufficient enough for me to break up my own daughter. You know. Now there are a lot more information. So we have this technology, let's use it. We are now realizing that things like personality, we are now realizing things like emotions matter. The topsoil that determines how effective parenting is the fact that many of our own generation, and I speak to my own generation particularly, are now recognizing that we are parenting from trauma. It sounds funny, but it's the truth, right? We are parenting from trauma, and this trauma-driven parenting is actually making our children becoming the so it's okay generation.
Yes. Let's have a little bit of understanding of what you're saying. We are parenting from trauma. Help people understand that. Essentially, it sounds like you're saying people are trying to bring up their children the way they were brought up. So that's trauma. I thought that was a lesson learned for them, and then...
Yeah, I mean, it worked.
What kind of trauma are you talking about here?
It worked for our parents, basically, because they were looking for a brighter future. They were looking for a more stable family life, so to speak. But then they also were working together. So an interesting concept that I realized recently is that when a mountain is about to be birthed, a volcano erupts. So the outburst of that volcano brings up a new mountain, right? Now, put that into the human psychology. There's a lot of disruption going on right now. There are a lot of us looking for greener pastures, even where in places where we've not even invested in. And we are not looking at what that would be like for our children. So these children, concept of the volcano, are now becoming to feel like, since you are going to go after your own greener pastures, I might as well just do what I like. But our concept of looking for greener pastures is that we want to thrive, not just survive like our own parents did. Yeah. Our parents survived, but they were happy. We are looking for thriving, but we are pretty much unhappy, pretty much isolated in our anticipation of a better future, pretty much disconnected with one another.
My apologies, madam. You have not spoken to those traumas. What are the traumas that some of today's parents grew up with?
Some of the traumas include the lack of choice, the way they wanted it to be.
Do what you're told.
Do what you're told, not what you wanted. Yeah. Another trauma could be the very fact that even our parents were looking for greener pastures, and, we had to grow up on our own. So the emotions that I mentioned earlier, we're not paid attention to. So we learned to suppress our emotions. We learned to pretend our emotions don't matter. We learned to assume that emotions were secondary to living. Meanwhile, emotions were the primary and the trajectory with which we actually live with one another. So you find people living together within the space of 2-3 years. They're like, I don't want to do this again. I can as well call it quits. Our parents' time, you're forced to stay because you're forced to stay because of the children. Yes. Now you're forced to stay because of the children, and these children could see that you're unhappy. And this was trauma, and these were lessons that were unconsciously adopting into our lifestyle. So when you tell a Gen Z today that you do not have resilience, they think that you're asking them to suffer.
The last time we talked about parenting on this program, which is not too long ago, actually, at the end of the program, we both ended up apologizing to children out there and saying, well,
we're sorry.
Sorry, we haven't been listening to you. They say we should listen to you in our own time. We were not listening. Children should be seen and not heard.
Yeah, exactly.
That was the training that we had.
I'm talking, you are talking. Who are you, by the way?
In fact, you wouldn't even dare try it. You wouldn't even try it.
So you have parents on both ends of the spectrum. Parents who are trying so hard to listen more, but they are also not bringing the balance of boundaries, the balance of processes, the balance of clear vision into their parenting. And you have those that, if I survived it, you will survive it, do whatever it is that you want to do. So, and then you have these two extremes, and children from these two extremes meeting together in the larger society, communicating on Facebook and Twitter, and you know what? What do you have? A conviction that the older ones do not know nothing.
They always look at us like, that's the look that they give us.
Exactly.
This one doesn't know anything.
Those older generations don't know.
Dinosaur.
Just to give parents today the an idea of the consequences of not doing things right. What are the things we're up against with the children? You work with teens, so you can tell us some things that most parents, the parents of these teens are not even aware that their children are doing or that they are doing right in their faces. I saw a video of codes. Codes.
You mean the Manchester Ronaldo features and the cucumber and...
She started. They literally have their own language. You have no idea what they are saying. They are communicating vulgar, scams and everything right in your face. You will pick their phone. You will read their texts. You have no idea what they're saying.
Talking about.
So,
and they're telling you they're going to ICM, and you're assuming that it's actually ICM in Alausa, but it's something else.
What is ICM?
Oh, you can just sit in more.
Oh, okay.
But their own is...
Oh, no, it's something different entirely.
Where is their own ICM?
You don't want to say it on TV. That's what she's saying.
Okay. It's NTBB. My God.
I hear parents, especially when they come to me and they're like, they're overwhelmed by this. They're scared, and it's so easy to live or to lead without fear. But what I say to them is this, it's okay. You realizing it now, it means that it's something that you can work on.
You can work on it.
And it actually starts with the patience to listen to yourself first.
We'll talk about the parents. Tell us the things that some of the things that these teens do that
but
parents
you mentioned them, the codes,
That's
the
just
addiction,
one of them.
The addiction.
Addiction to what?
Addiction to everything. Addiction to devices, addiction to porn. I think COVID-19 actually brought that to a lot of parents' purview, that this is what they're as young as 10 years. Did you say porn? Yes, as young as 10-year-olds are addicted to porn.
No. Stop, please.
Oh, no, I'm not joking here, ma'am.
You mean pornography?
Pornography.
10 years old?
Yes, ma'am.
Don't look at me like that. She's the one saying it.
How do they get introduced to these things?
Oh, but we were homeschooling with devices. And while you were homeschooling with Zoom, there were pop-ups and there were YouTube videos for them to watch and there were so many other things for them to see. And we're not putting parental control on some of those things. We're too busy worried about if we're going to have a job after COVID, to recognize that our children were also suffering. They were feeling neglected, the lack of social connection that they enjoyed. They were going to school for social connection, not just to learn. And all of a sudden, they were isolated away from their friends, and they were looking for other means of connecting with the outside world. And that brought up a lot of cyberbullying. It brought up cases of depression among teenagers.
Wait.
Yes.
Teenagers
getting depressed.
Depression.
Clinically depressed.
I thought that COVID brought families closer together because people were forced to be at home, so they had no choice than to interact because they hadn't had that in forever.
Oh, is that the force that's the problem?
But that was exactly
the problem.
What it was supposed to do, but that wasn't the reality. Because if you check the Edo State domestic violence statistics, you would notice that it rose up at that time.
Yes.
So what do children in this situation do? They hide in their rooms and they look for other means of connecting with the outside world. They assume, yes. So they assume that you are so messed up that if I am going to be just half as messed up as you are, I might as well get my groove on right now. And that is what we are dealing with right now. So, you have children who are anxious. By 10, you should be getting to that space where you're looking forward to debating, literally and debating society and everything. Mm-hmm. But you would rather sit behind a screen than face an entire crowd because you are afraid that everyone sees the mess that you are. So rather than do that, you vaping electronically, you use hard substances to get through the day. the pharmaceutical council is doing a lot to control substance abuse these days, but I mean, the mixture of coughlin and all those cough syrups and all those drugs are beginning to show us just how bad the trend is. So substance abuse, porn addiction are just the bare surface of what our children are struggling.
Bare surface.
Bare surface.
I've said this before.
Not to shock you, ma'am, but there is also the ideas of suicidal pact. This world is not worth living again. So let's make a suicidal pact and let's begin to. So these are some of the works that we do.
What's this suicidal pact?
We decide the day, the time that we decide we can take care of we take our lives. Because it's no, what is the point of the world? What exactly are we looking forward to? If you tell any, they're asking us, what exactly are we looking forward to right now?
I want to grow up. I want to have a family of my own. I want to own a company.
But they don't even want to have a family. They don't even want to have children. They are making up their minds right now not to have children because they feel like adults. And realistically, adults are the problem of the world right now.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah, so they don't want to become adults.
So they don't want to become adults. So I'd rather have all the fun that I want to have right now.
Now, are parents aware of these things? If they are aware, are they conscious that it could actually be living with them?
This is Channels Television. Please stay tuned as we head to Benin City, the Edo State capital, for the closing ceremony of the Edo State Education Summit.
This is a live Channels Television event.
Our Technical and Vocational Education and Training Board. The board secretary is Comrade Austin Igodaro. And of course, we also have a library board. And we have 5 state-owned tertiary institutions. We have Edo State University, Uzaire, and the Vice Chancellor is Engineer Professor Aluyo. We have the Edo Ambrosali University, Ekoma, and the Acting Vice Chancellor is Professor Adagbonyi. And of course, our Edo State Polytechnic, Usen, and the Acting Rector is Engineer Moriyi. We also have our College of Education with the Acting Provost, Professor Mrs. Rose Osaige, and of course, the soon-to-be reopened School of Agriculture. So thank you all of you for coming, and I want to appreciate all your efforts throughout this week. Permit me, ladies and gentlemen, to also acknowledge the efforts of my staff at the Edo State Ministry of Education. We've been working so hard, and we will continue to work hard. We started this week with the opening of the first ever Edo State International Book and Art Festival with the theme, Every Child a Reading Champion. And we had guests, it was truly an international event. We had guests from as far as South Africa, Ghana, and other parts of the world and Africa. On Thursday was our main plenary section. And the audience, so every day of the week is a different audience. Wednesday was all about our students. Thursday was all about the education community. So we had this hall filled with all public and private tertiary institutions because we wanted to come together and talk about education and learning. And His Excellency, at the end of Thursday's deliberation, launched the Edo State Learning Agenda. Can I hear you say it, please? Edo State Learning Agenda. The Learning Agenda is a framework that will enable us to start making sure that your children are not only in school, but they are in school and they are learning. Since 2019, Governor Baseki has been asking us, are the teachers in school? If they are in school, are they teaching your children? And are your children in school? If they are in school, are they learning? After 5 years of education reform, we are now at the point where we are now ready to answer that question, whether your children are learning or not. So a round of applause to Mr. Governor on that. And on Friday, which was yesterday, we were all at the stadium. Many of you were there also with your children. Over 12,000 of us were at the Samuel Gbemudia Stadium for the maiden edition of Governor's Cup. And the schools that competed for the boys were Benin Technical College and versus Ogbona Secondary School. Benin Technical College won 2-1. And for the girls team, it was Idia College versus girls of Usugbenu Technical School, Ira. And Idia College won 7-0. Yesterday's event was a very important one because the governor had said that we are not just going to focus on academics for your children. We must also focus on sports, athletics. And so we have started this. Parents, I'm using this opportunity to plead with all of you that you must do what you can to support your children. We need to kill them. They need to buy sporting wear. They need to buy proper footwear. So government alone cannot do it. And that's one of the reasons we are here today. Today is Parent Summit. We have not invited anybody else, but just you, the parents of our students and pupils. And we are doing it because we have discovered that in the last 6 years of education reform, that old students, old pupils, are very involved in our schools. Even community, through the school-based management committee, they are very, very involved in our schools. But we are seeing that we don't yet have enough parents who are involved in the activities of school. When we call for open day, which is the day you are supposed to come to school with your child, to meet one-on-one with your child's teacher and find out how your child is doing at school, we are seeing that quite a number of our parents are not showing up. And so today's summit is for us to sit down and rub minds. May we tell ourselves the truth. Government don't they do in part. Government will still continue to do in own. But what we won't follow on our talk today be say, as government they do what they do now to make sure say on our children they learn for our government schools. What una will fit do? How una will maintain this progress where we don't start? So now make us call all of una today. The second reason where we call una today be say we want also talk about values. Una dey hear me so? We want to talk about values. We are very interested as a ministry to bring back values into our school. When we start this, in fact, one of the first things where governor here, we come make am dey concerned, say we must quickly expand Edo beds to secondary school, was because many of our students for secondary schools come they talk, say school na scam. I would not hear them, they talk am before. They say school na scam. So we are now at a point where we must change that narrative. And thank God we are already doing it. So I want also beg una, as Commissioner of Education, say make una help us change that talk. Make una remove that talk from our children's mouth. Because school not be scam. So thank you so much, everyone. And welcome again. And we are going to have a wonderful time together today. Thank you all.
Shall we put our hands together again for the Honorable Commissioner for Education, Dr. Joe. Your Excellency, one of the key areas that the Ministry of Education has focused on in the immediate past and up till now is the need to protect our students and our pupils. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to turn to the back page of the program that you hold in your hand. We are going to make a commitment as a government, as parents, as traditional rulers, as clergy, indeed as all stakeholders here present, to get involved in committing to this pledge to do no harm to our students and pupils wherever they are. You are all aware of stories of sexual harassment, of defilement, of rapes, and of beatings and maimings of especially the girl child, and indeed all school-going children. And we are coming together today to say, very emphatically, do no harm. I'd like, therefore, to crave the indulgence of His Excellency to ask that everyone rise to their feet as we commit to this pledge. Please, we are all going to say it out. It's a commitment to do no harm, to protect our children. I'll just lead it. You see there, I pledge that I will. I am Austin Osakwe, so I'm going to put my name there. I expect that you do the same. Let's go, please. I, Austin Osakwe, pledge that I will conduct interactions with pupils and students that are safe, appropriate, child-friendly, and sensitive to the feelings of the child. Be familiar with the procedures for reporting concerns or incidents at Ministry of Education. Immediately report any concerns relating to the safety or welfare of a pupil, students I am in contact with, to the head teacher / executive principal of the school. To avoid working alone with pupils, students